She canceled my birthday after I planned everything around her pregnancy and then blamed me for it. She did not show up to your birthday. The birthday you planned entirely around her. The pregnancy, she said, made everything so hard. And then, when you brought it up, she looked you in the eye and told you it was your fault for not reminding her enough. That moment right there is what 3 years of this friendship had been building toward. And it tells you everything you need to know. Let's rewind and really sit with this situation, because I think it deserves more than a quick scroll. We have a 24-year-old woman who has been pouring effort, money, time, and genuine emotional energy into a friendship for over 3 years. She lives 2 to 3 hours away from this person. That means every single plan, every dinner, every birthday celebration, every effort to maintain this connection required actual sacrifice. We are talking about gas money, hours on the road, taking time out of a busy life, and showing up with excitement and love for someone who apparently could not be bothered to do the same. Picture what that drive looks like in practice. She is merging onto a highway, probably singing along to something, probably genuinely excited, probably running through conversation topics in her head, probably looking forward to a day that the other person has not thought about once. That kind of imbalance does not appear overnight. It builds slowly, one cancelled plan at a time, until one day you look back and realize you have been carrying this friendship completely alone. The excuses evolved over time too, and that is what makes this especially painful to analyze. In the early days it was tiredness, which, fine, everyone gets tired. Then it became wanting to spend time with the boyfriend, which is a little more pointed because it signals that you are being actively deprioritized. There is something particularly stinging about that excuse specifically. It is not an illness. It is not an emergency. It is a choice, stated plainly, that someone else was simply more worth her time. Then it escalated to something even more disrespectful, which was simply not texting at all. Not a cancellation, not an excuse, not even a sorry, just silence. Just a complete absence where a friend used to be. And if you have ever been on the receiving end of that particular brand of dismissal, you know how disorienting it is. You start wondering if you got the day wrong. You check your messages twice. You tell yourself there must be a reason. You give every possible benefit of the doubt because that is what you do when you care about someone. That progression is not accidental. That is someone who became comfortable enough with the relationship to stop pretending they cared about maintaining it. What really gets under my skin about this entire situation is the birthday incident specifically, because that was not just another cancelled plan. That was a calculated, intentional effort on our narrator's part to make sure everything worked for this friend despite the pregnancy. She picked the restaurant with the pregnancy in mind. She chose the activities with the pregnancy in mind. She thought about what food would be safe, what environment would be comfortable, what kind of day would feel low effort and easy for someone in that condition. She sent multiple confirmation texts in the weeks and days leading up to the event to make absolutely certain there would be no miscommunication. She did everything right. She did everything a thoughtful, caring friend would do. And the response she got was not just a no-show. It was a counter-accusation. It was this friend looking at all of that effort, all of that consideration, all of that love, and saying, actually, this is on you. I want to pause here because that response deserves its own moment of attention. The audacity of blaming the person who sent multiple reminder texts for not reminding you enough is genuinely staggering. That is not a misunderstanding. That is not a mistake. That is someone who knows they did something wrong, knows they cannot defend it, and so instead of owning it they flip the script and make the other person feel guilty. Think about what that moment must have felt like to receive. You have just spent your own birthday alone, or at least without the person you planned everything around. You worked up the nerve to say something. And instead of an apology, instead of any acknowledgement of what she put you through, you get blamed. The ground shifts under your feet. You start questioning your own memory. You wonder if somehow, impossibly, you did mess up. That is what gaslighting does. It does not announce itself. It just quietly makes you doubt your own reality. It is a manipulation tactic, whether she realizes it or not. And the fact that our narrator had the receipts, had the screenshots to prove every single reminder she sent, tells you this was not the first time something like this had happened. You do not start saving screenshots unless you have already been gaslit before. Here is what I think is really happening beneath the surface of this friendship. Some people keep certain friends in their lives not because they value them as equals, but because they need an audience. They need someone who will celebrate them, check in on them, make plans with them, and show up for them consistently, while they themselves contribute almost nothing in return. It is a parasitic dynamic, and the host usually does not notice until they have been drained dry. Our narrator was that host. She was the friend who would drive 3 hours, spend money she did not have to spare, put in weeks of planning, and still show up with a smile. She probably told herself things like, "That is just how she is," or, "I know she appreciates it even if she does not say it." That kind of internal negotiating is how good people stay in bad friendships for years. They extend grace so generously and so consistently that they talk themselves out of every red flag. And that reliability, that unconditional presence, was not appreciated. It was exploited. The pregnancy added an extra layer of complexity to this entire situation, and I think that is what makes cutting this person off so emotionally complicated. Because societally we are conditioned to give pregnant women a pass on almost everything. Tired, sure. Cancelled plans, understandable. Did not text back, of course, she is growing a human. And there is nothing inherently wrong with extending that grace to someone who is genuinely struggling. Pregnancy is hard. It is physically exhausting and emotionally overwhelming, and it does change your capacity for things. But that grace is meant to be extended to someone who, in better circumstances, would show up for you. It is not a blank check issued to someone who was already treating you as an afterthought long before any pregnancy entered the picture. And that cultural conditioning is exactly what this friend was benefiting from, whether consciously or unconsciously. Our narrator knew that the moment she set a boundary, the moment she said enough, she would be painted as the villain who stressed out a first-time mom. That is a genuinely difficult position to be put in. You are essentially being held hostage by someone else's circumstances. The pregnancy becomes a shield, and the person holding it does not even have to try very hard to make it work. Society does most of the work for them. But here is the thing. Pregnancy explains some things. It does not explain 3+ years of consistent disrespect. It does not explain blaming someone for not reminding you about a birthday you confirmed multiple times. It does not explain the event that finally pushed our narrator to her limit, which was this person not even canceling on a plan but instead casually texting their mutual friend to say she was getting her hair and nails done instead. Read that again. She did not even have the decency to tell our narrator directly. She told a mutual friend, as if the information would somehow just drift over and land softly. No heads up, no apology, no acknowledgement that anyone else's time had value. Just a nonchalant announcement that she had better things to do. That is not pregnancy fatigue. That is character. I have to say something. That hair and nails thing broke me a little. She could not make it to your birthday, but she had energy for a salon appointment. She just did not have energy for you. What I also want to acknowledge is how lonely this situation must have been for our narrator before she finally made the decision to walk away. She mentioned she could not even vent to people around her about this because the pregnancy would automatically justify everything the friend did. That is a form of social isolation that does not get talked about enough. You are carrying this enormous, exhausting weight, this grief that is not quite grief because the person is still alive and still texting mutual friends about their salon trips, and you cannot put it down anywhere. You cannot set it on a table in front of someone and say, "Look at this, look at how heavy this has gotten." Because the moment you do, someone in the room will say, "Well, she is pregnant, give her a break." And then you have to smile and agree and carry it home alone. When you are dealing with someone whose behavior is genuinely hurtful but whose circumstances make them publicly untouchable, you end up holding all of that frustration completely alone. You cannot complain without being seen as cruel. You cannot set boundaries without being seen as heartless. You are just expected to keep absorbing the damage and calling it friendship. The decision to block rather than confront was also deeply considered, and I think it shows a level of emotional maturity that a lot of people would not have. She laid out her reasoning clearly. First, a conversation would not change anything because this person is fully aware of how she has been behaving. People who gaslight and deflect do not respond to honest conversations with sudden self-awareness. They respond with more deflection, more blame shifting, and more manipulation. Our narrator had already experienced that firsthand when she was blamed for the birthday. She knew exactly what shape that conversation would take. She had probably even rehearsed it in her head, played out every version of it, and landed on the same conclusion every single time. Nothing good would come of it. Second, she refused to be positioned as the person who upset a pregnant woman by bringing up legitimate grievances. That is not cowardice. That is wisdom. She protected herself and, honestly, she protected this friend from a conversation that would have been uncomfortable for everyone involved. The insight she landed on at the end of her post is the one that hit me the hardest. She said it felt like this friend got pleasure from knowing she had someone who cared about her and would stick around no matter what she did. That is a profound observation. Because that is exactly what some people look for in friendships. Not connection, not reciprocity, not genuine care, but control. The comfort of knowing that no matter how badly they behave, someone will still be there. There is something almost cruel about that dynamic when you really look at it, because the person being kept around is usually the kindest, most loyal, most patient person in the room. Their goodness is the very thing being used against them. And the moment that person stops being there, the inevitable text comes. "Oh my goodness, I miss you so much, let us make plans." Not because they genuinely miss you, but because the safety net just disappeared and they need to reel you back in. Blocking in advance of that text was the smartest thing our narrator could have done. Because that text, if she had seen it, would have been designed to reopen the door just enough to make her feel guilty for closing it. It would not have been an apology. It would have been bait. It would have been crafted, maybe not deliberately but instinctively, to trigger every soft, loyal, forgiving instinct that made our narrator such a good friend in the first place. And those instincts would have fired. Because that is what happens when you genuinely care about someone. You see their name pop up and some part of you still hopes. She knew it was coming. She closed the door anyway. And honestly, that took courage. Now for the verdict, and I am going to be very direct about this. Our narrator is not only not the villain of this story, she is someone who showed extraordinary patience, generosity, and self-restraint over a period of years. She gave this friendship every possible chance. She adapted her birthday plans to accommodate a pregnancy. She saved screenshots because she anticipated being gaslit. She chose not to have a confrontational conversation to protect a pregnant woman from stress she did not deserve. She made every right call at every possible moment. She was thoughtful when she had every reason to be angry. She was gracious when she had every reason to be done. And the person she was doing all of this for could not even send a text to cancel. The hard truth about one-sided friendships is that they do not end because of one dramatic incident. They end because of the slow, grinding accumulation of moments where one person showed up and the other one did not. And that accumulation is invisible while it is happening. You do not feel it as a single wound. You feel it as a slow, quiet erosion of something you thought was solid. Our narrator's friend did not lose this friendship because of the birthday. She lost it because of 3 years of decisions that communicated, clearly and consistently, that her own comfort was always going to matter more than anyone else's feelings. The birthday was just the moment the math finally became undeniable. And the final thing I want to say about this is for anyone who is currently in a friendship that looks like this one. If you are the one driving 3 hours, planning events, sending reminders, saving screenshots, and still ending up alone at a restaurant table, that is not friendship. That is servitude with a nicer name. You are allowed to stop. You do not need a dramatic confrontation. You do not need permission. You do not need to wait until they hurt you one more time just to be sure. You already know. And so did she. I came home from deployment to find my apartment destroyed and my fiancé gone for good. 8:43 p.m. He came home from deployment to find his mattress stabbed. Not moved, not sat on wrong, not worn out. Stabbed. And that was somehow not even the worst thing he discovered that day. That single detail tells you everything about who this woman revealed herself to be the moment she thought she had nothing left to lose. Let us start at the beginning of this situation because the setup matters enormously. This man was deployed. He was away serving, doing his job, completely unable to monitor what was happening at home. Before he left, he had made arrangements that involved trusting his fiancée with real, significant financial and legal access. Power of attorney is not a small thing. It is one of the most intimate legal tools one person can extend to another. It means, I trust you with my affairs while I cannot be here to manage them myself. He gave her that trust completely, without hesitation, without conditions, the way you give trust to someone you have chosen to build a life with. And she used it to buy a house without telling him. Let that sink in for just a second. He is deployed. He is unreachable. He cannot monitor bank accounts in real time, cannot have a quick conversation over coffee, cannot sit down and say, "Hey, what is going on with our finances?" There is a particular kind of helplessness that comes with being far from home and unable to do anything about what is happening in your absence. You have to trust. You have no other option. And in that window of vulnerability, in that space where he had no choice but to believe in her, she made a unilateral decision to purchase an entire property using access he gave her for emergencies and basic management. Not a small purchase, not a splurge, not even something that affects only her. A house. Without a conversation, without a plan, without even a heads-up text. When he finally had the chance to call her and raise his concerns, he did so gently. I want to emphasize that because it matters. He was trying to be measured and fair despite having every reason to be furious. Picture what that phone call must have felt like for him. He is thousands of miles away, trying to process something that does not make sense, trying to give the woman he loves the benefit of the doubt when every instinct in him must have been screaming that something was very wrong. He approached the conversation carefully, giving her room to explain, giving her the benefit of the doubt in a situation where most people would have already made up their minds. And what did she give him in return for that generosity? She told him she bought the house because she did not trust him not to kick her out of his apartment. Let me say that again. She used his power of attorney, behind his back, while he was on deployment, and the reason she gave him was that she did not trust him. Okay, I need a moment. She abused his trust because she did not trust him. I cannot even begin to unpack that logic. What that response revealed is not just poor judgment. It reveals a fundamental breakdown in how she viewed this relationship and her place in it. She was not acting like a partner. She was acting like someone who had already decided the relationship might end and was securing her own exit strategy before he even had a chance to respond to the situation. Think about what that means. At some point, while he was gone, while he was working and waiting and probably thinking about coming home to her, she had looked at the life they were building together and quietly decided it was not safe. Not because he had done anything. Not because there was a real threat. But because somewhere inside her she had already started to let go. The house was not an act of love, or an investment decision, or even a mistake born from excitement. It was a backup plan. It was her saying, without saying it, that she did not believe in this relationship enough to make a major financial decision together. She just believed in herself enough to make sure she would be fine when it fell apart. His response after that phone call was swift, calm, and remarkably precise. He went to the bank first, before any conversation, and revoked her power of attorney and cancelled all recurring financial access. That move matters more than it might seem on the surface. It was not vindictive, it was protective. He was making sure that no further damage could be done while he was still figuring out what to do next. There is something deeply admirable about that kind of clarity under pressure. He was heartbroken, almost certainly, but he did not let the heartbreak make him careless. Then he communicated clearly and in writing that if she chose to remain in his apartment she would be responsible for half the rent. He set a clear boundary, communicated it in writing, and then went back to completing his deployment. That is not emotional reactivity. That is someone handling a devastating situation with extraordinary discipline. What happened when he got home is where this story takes a turn that is genuinely difficult to sit with. She had moved out, which was the right outcome, but the way she left was a statement in itself. She took his television. She took his kitchen appliances. She left the apartment in a condition that required 3 hours of cleaning before it was livable. Imagine coming home after a deployment, exhausted in the way that only that particular kind of exhaustion can make you, and being greeted not by rest but by a space that has been deliberately left in disarray. The shower was clogged. Water was standing in the drain. And then he found the mattress. Stabbed. Deliberately, pointedly, unmistakably. Not once, the way something might happen by accident. Stabbed in the way that requires intention and effort and a willingness to stand in someone else's bedroom and do violence to the place where they sleep. And her side of the bed had a stain that he is being very measured about describing. This was not someone who simply moved out in a hurry. This was someone who wanted to leave a mark. This was deliberate damage designed to make him feel the impact of her leaving. The violence of that departure, and I use that word intentionally, speaks to something deeply unsettling about her state of mind. Stabbing a mattress is not grief. It is not heartbreak. It is not even anger in its most human form. It is a calculated act of destruction aimed at someone you have already decided does not deserve your basic decency. She could not have a mature ending to a relationship that she herself had already compromised. She had to make sure he felt it. She had to leave something behind that he could not ignore, something that would force him to think about her even in the middle of cleaning up the mess she made. And then she was gone. The fact that he chose not to involve legal authorities over the taken items speaks to who he is as a person. He weighed it, he looked at what was left, he decided the battle was not worth fighting for a television and some kitchen appliances. That is a measured, proportional response from someone who clearly just wanted his life back and not more conflict. He spent money refurnishing an apartment that should have been clean and whole when he returned from serving his country. He came home from a deployment and instead of rest he got a drain snake and a stabbed mattress and a bill for a new bed. He mentioned at the end that it really sucks that things had to end this way, and I found that line genuinely moving. Because it was not anger, it was not bitterness, it was just sadness. The quiet grief of someone who came home expecting something and found something else entirely. Now let me be very clear about where I stand on all of this. This woman was not a victim of a relationship ending badly. She was an active participant in the destruction of something that could have been addressed with honesty and communication. The moment she chose to buy a house behind his back using his own legal access, she made a decision that ended the engagement. She just did not have the courage to tell him that while he could still look her in the face. The guilt tripping during his port call is what seals it for me. He called her to sort out the logistics of ending things, and she used that call to tell him about being hurt at work and how much she missed him. When you have secretly bought a house without your partner's knowledge, trashed their apartment, stolen their belongings, and stabbed their mattress, you do not get to play the victim in the next phone call. The emotional manipulation was not a reflex, it was a strategy. She was trying to soften him enough to avoid the consequences of what she had done. He came home from serving, rebuilt his apartment from scratch, and moved forward without looking back. That is not just the right ending to this story. That is the only ending that makes sense for someone who handled an absolute disaster with this much composure and dignity. The relationship was over the moment she signed those house papers. He just had to come home to figure out what she had already decided. And now he knows. and now he can move on. Drop a comment below telling me which story hit harder for you, and if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button because we have so much more coming.